Hey everybody, welcome to Houdini Hangout. It's the 23rd of August, and we're here on another Wednesday night talking some Houdini. Hopefully, getting some new, fresh knowledge, and yeah, just overall just chilling and having a good time. Um, hope you're all having a good day today so far. When I was kind of trying to think of and prepare for this evening, I was like, I just couldn't come up with anything interesting to talk about. I know there's a million things to talk about in Houdini, and there's always, suggestions and things like that. But I was just like, I don't know. I just didn't have anything that was like burning in my soul. So I decided that we would do another one of these Q&A sessions just to be able to, kind of encourage you all to bring your questions to the stream. I know a lot of people ask questions on the Discord server, which, by the way, here is a link to. So a lot of people will ask questions there, and, just generally, bring a lot of questions and things like that. And so I was like, well, maybe we should just do this again, because hopefully you have a decent amount of questions that we can kind of go through, talk about. Maybe we'll crack open Houdini, maybe we'll be talking about more theoretical stuff or ideas or whatever. But if you do want to join the Discord, there's a link on houdinihangout.com that you can check out. And yeah, so that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to do kind of a live Q&A. Ooh, Davis, hello, welcome. Just dropping that right in chat. Could you go over starting a plant growth animation via a pyro source spread? That's interesting. I don't know if that's the way I would do it, but it certainly is an interesting idea, and we could certainly take a look at that. Yes, that's interesting. Very, very interesting. I have to let that percolate for a second here in my brain and think about how you would exactly do that. Yeah, let me get back to that in a second. Welcome to the stream. Good to see you. Davis and I got to connect in person this, March in San Francisco. So that would be fun. Oh, cool. Oh, you were at SIGGRAPH as well. Davis was just saying he's at SIGGRAPH as well. Yeah, it's unfortunate I missed you. I honestly, there was a couple days where I was feeling a little under the weather at SIGGRAPH, which I think everybody had something. There was a few things going around at SIGGRAPH, so everybody came home with a goodie bag of some sort. But yeah, that's too bad. I would have loved to have seen you, but hopefully you had a good time anyways. SIGGRAPH is always it's got a place near and dear to my heart, since that's where I learned about. Oh, got you too. Yeah, see, there you go, Davis. There we go. Everybody got a little dose of something. I heard that there was strep throat and COVID going around, so it was a fun time for all. So, but most of the time I was wearing my mask because I was feeling a little under the weather, so I figured I'll be better safe than sorry. Anyways, yeah, so that's an interesting comment, but we'll talk about that. I see Mr. Torno is in the chat there too. Pyro to make plants. Maybe try pyro advection for points for kin effect skeletons. Yep. David just is saying that he is glad he missed all of that. Yes. So all of that, so that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to do some kind of Q&A type stuff. Just kind of let this be a little bit of a more open, kind of conversation. Honestly, that's what I always kind of want this to be, but sometimes, people don't have questions or thoughts, but I figure doing this every so often will be good. So that's kind of the main idea of this evening's stream. It's going to be, like I said, a little more loose. But the main, the one thing I always say is that if you have any questions or any thoughts or anything like that, please put them in the chat. Obviously tonight we're doing more of a Q&A style thing. So this would certainly be encouraged tonight. Obviously that's kind of the whole deal tonight is just a Q&A style stream. But Yeah, if you have any questions or thoughts, please drop them in the chat. If you think I'm doing something not so smart or just going about something the wrong way, over engineering, whatever, uh, please feel free to drop them in the chat. There's no such thing as a stupid question or a stupid comment, nothing like that. So this is a safe place to drop your comments in chat and just see what's talk about whatever's going on. So that's kind of the idea for the stream tonight. I do want to kind of announce one other thing that I am going to be doing. I kind of realized that I had all of these HIP files from now doing this for basically 2 years. And I figured, well, I should probably have a way to share them with everybody and share maybe other files too, whatever, whatever other kind of files might go along with this. Obviously I can't share models and things like that if they're, if I don't own them, but, other things from the stream that I could share with everybody. So, I was kind of thinking about it. I was like, you know what, why don't I just make like a custom Google Drive that I can store whatever in, and then just do a little, a Patreon basically in order to, allow people to sign up if they want access to the HIP files from all of my streams. And those will be, uploaded, as I go. Basically at the end of the night, I'll just upload my HIP files and they'll be in that Google Drive for anybody that wants to subscribe. So I set that up this week. Let me just switch over here. And so I have a Patreon that I've set up here. There's 2 different memberships. If you just want to feed my coffee addiction, that's there as well. So if you want to do that, that's great. There's some fees and things like that to running a stream like this. But that's making money is not really the point of this whole thing. But if you'd like to support me, that's cool. But if you want the HIP file access, that's going to be there as well. The process should be automated, hopefully, at this point. I did have one person sign up, so I was able to test something real quick and see if I got it set up. So it should work, but it'll... Oh, thanks, Ruben. Yeah, I mean, deserve is whatever. I mean, I've learned all of this stuff through a lot of free stuff on the internet and things like that. So happy to be able to share back in some way. With this stream, but also I just want to make sure that I'm not spiraling into a a fee hole of just losing money on this stream constantly. So just figure I'll just support that a little bit. And yeah, I checked out some of the other streams out there that do something similar, and I saw John Kuntz was doing his for $5 a month, and I'm like, well, my stuff isn't quite up to his level. So we're a little under that level, so that's good. But anyways, so this is there. Let me drop the link in the chat. It's a pretty easy link, but there you go. So that is the Patreon link. And so, yeah, I'm going to do, it's not going to be like something that's going to have like a ton of interaction. It'll just kind of be there. But obviously you can reach out through the Discord server and ask questions about files and things like that. Like obviously having the files will make it a lot easier to follow along with certain things maybe in previous streams. But if you run into an issue or you're trying to figure something out, that'll, certainly there's a help section on the Discord, and obviously I can help you directly and, maybe tangentially help some people understand a little bit better what was going on maybe in one of those files or something like that. If I didn't explain it well or whatever. So, so that's that. So Patreon, Discord, if you want to join there. I really hate the overly selling yourself thing, like trying to like promote yourself and things like that. So I'm just going to probably mildly promote it. It's not going to be a huge deal, but, that's that. And, so we'll move forward, but, obviously, like for me, that's like a big deal putting something out there for money. I don't really do that. That's like not my thing. So it's really weird for me. So it's like today I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to publish this thing or send a tweet out or whatever I did about it. I'm like, okay, but here we are. All right. So I think the way that we'll kind of do this, obviously we have one question, one thought already, but let's... let's continue. So, okay. So, if you have any thoughts or any questions or things like that, drop them in the chat. We'll be kind of monitoring that, and obviously, just like normal, we'll be able to have kind of a little back and forth there. But let's kind of talk a little bit about what Davis had mentioned there. So, Davis, what Davis had said was, could you go over starting? Hey, show. I'll say show. Hey, show. How's it going? Welcome to the stream. Got that. There's a lot of vowels in or a lot of consonants in a row there, and I don't know how to say some of those together. But anyways, welcome to the stream. Glad to have you. So Davis had asked about doing some sort of a plant growth animation with a pyrosource spread. And I think some other people had some other comments there. And I think what I would probably go about doing there is something like, I'm just trying to think whether it would be, I don't think it would be a plant growth with a fire. Like, I think the idea you're getting from that pyro source spread, is interesting. Like, it certainly is interesting, and it could work. I think maybe the simpler way to think about it is that you don't even need to go into the whole pyro source spread thing unless you really, really want that for some reason in your simulation. But what you could do there is have just a bunch of points, and yeah, it could be a SOP solver as well, for sure. Yep, exactly. So some sort of a spreading animation, right? There's a ton of different ways you can do that. And I think what you would want to do is use that to transfer maybe some sort of an attribute onto. I'm trying to think if there would be a way to do that with like a Kinefx skeleton. I think Ninehole suggested that before. Mask from geometry to avoid sim. Exactly. Yeah, that's a great. David brings up a great one there too. You could mask from geometry. I also really like the the attribute adjust nodes have that like fall off that you can animate. So you could animate a fall off in there as well. So that could be really cool. I'm trying to think exactly how you would maybe do that with a Kinefx skeleton, right? Because let's just see here. All right, let's load up. Let's do some Houdini stuff here since we're talking about some more official stuff. Let's do this. All right, so your question is well, here, you know what? Before we go into this, there's a really quick question that I can answer and show you really quickly. So let's just do this real quick. So this will be a pop sim. So you just have a quick question about a pop simulation. So if you did a pop network here, right? This is a standard pop sim. And if we did something like a sphere, right? And wired it in, right? We've got our pop network here, right? So we've got our points accumulating. And what I'm going to do is just give this a quick add to an inherent velocity, give it some random velocity, and we'll just, well, you know what? Let's save this since we'll be uploading this later. Let me just save this real quick. 23. And this is going to be Q&A. Okay, cool. Okay, so the really simple thing here is under your birth attribute here, you have a birth rate, this constant birth rate. Now, these are the ways that you can adjust your the number of particles coming in your simulation. So in this case here, we've got, let me just zoom back out here just so you can kind of see it. There's a whole bunch of particles coming in, but say you only wanted a few, you could do something like 500, and it's going to be quite a bit fewer. And then you could go even lower and do 50 and do even fewer. Now, the impulse activation is going to be a little bit of a different way to do this. I forget exactly the math behind this. I think this is per individual frame, right? So each frame we're going to be exporting this many. So this really is meant to be more of like a one-shot type thing here, where you would pulse this on and off, this impulse activation, and allow this count to just, it could just be like a pop, or pop, just a little burst every, time you impulse. So that's a little bit more of an explicit way of doing it, whereas the constant birth rate is going to be particles emitted per second. The impulse count is going to be each time this node cooks. So that's kind of the two different ways of doing it. So, yeah, there you go. So that was a pretty simple little question there. Yeah, no problem. Another quick question here is, I know we don't use a particle fluid surface, but what do we do after the vellum solver for rendering vellum grains? Honestly, grains can, I think you can render it in one of two different ways, depending on what specifically you're doing with it. I've actually done some volume stuff with snow. Hey, Wallaby8, nice to see you. Thanks. So I've done stuff with particles, like grains, as spheres, right? So that's one way that you can do it, is actually just when you import it, say into something like Solaris, those will get rendered as spheres, and your P scale will be the scale of your particle. And you can also rasterize it into a volume and do stuff like that for snow. I've done that in the past. And if you check out my stream, I think it was probably January of last year, I did a stream on that with a snow simulation. So you might want to check that out for as far as streams go, to see kind of how I went about doing that. I don't know if I showed it on there or not, but I think I talked about it a little bit. And that would just be like an attribute rasterize, or rasterize from attribute. I don't forget the name of it, but you can rasterize your particles into a volume. So that would be a way of doing it. So that's kind of maybe two different ways of doing it. There's probably more, but those are two things that you could take a look at. Honestly, rendering is definitely my one of my weaker spots, because most of the time my job at my studio was just to sim things and hand things over to other artists to render at the end. So like my rendering chops are like pretty weak, honestly, but I do my best. But all right, so let's drop a geometry down and take a look at something like a animation for a, let's see here. Let's do plant growth. Let's do that. All right, let's jump in here. So what if we did something like well, first of all, let's make, I'm just trying to think of the best way to go about doing this. So I think what you might want to do is, so you could do something like, let's just do the most stupidly simple thing in the world here. So let's grab a line. We'll just do this. Maybe it's got, I don't know, 10 points, I guess. I don't know. That seems good enough. And let's just say that we wanted to obviously turn this into some sort of a plant. So we'll just do a sweep, and let's grab this. This is just going to be like a blade of grass or something. I don't know. I did something sort of like this actually the other day. So let's do square tube. Let's see here. And, oh, actually, you know what? It's probably easier to do this with a grid, because I can just do 2 by 2 and size of, this will probably need to be bigger, but that's okay. So instead, let's do second input cross sections, and we'll do this in, oh geez, what is it? YZ? No, XY. There we go. Cool. So we've got this. Let's do it something like, I don't know, something like that. And we'll do our end caps. Just do a single polygon, and I'm just going to reverse these cross sections because they're going the wrong way. Got the normals on the other side. So we should have this line here and then a sweep around it. It's looking good. Cool. Okay. So what we would do then is, if we wanted to do, let's see, would be capture. Joint capture, probably proximity's fine. Let's just grab that. This is the geometry to capture. Oh, wait, no, that's wrong. I thought this was it. There we go. That's the one we want. Okay. So you can always tell when something's like a kineffects node because it's got these three, or most of the time because it's got these three inputs, you know, in and out. And you've got the rest geometry, you've got the capture pose, and you have the animated pose. The other one is like a more base level. I think it's actually from our old bone rigging tools and stuff like that. But anyways, all right, so let's grab our rest geometry here. Our capture pose is going to be this line. And then we will have, I guess we could just throw the same thing in for the animated pose as well. However, we need this to be, this isn't going to do anything because we need this. It's going to be like, hey, you're not going to be getting, you don't have any transforms and all this kind of stuff. So what we need to do is, I believe we can just do a rig doctor here and put a polyline in here and then just wire these guys in. Let's initialize our transform. We'll reorient these to child. And so now, now we have joints, right? So there's a few things that you need in order for these to be joints. You need them to have names and you need to have them have these transforms and local transforms, right? Now we can see that these all have names and they have this nice kind of view state going on here where we can actually see each and every one of these points. So now if we come down here, yep, we should have this joint capture proximity working, right? And so that's all good. So what I will do here is I will do a joint deform down here. We'll just wire these up and I'm just going to do a rig pose for here. And so this will allow us to grab some of these and just adjust them, right? However, we need to be down here or else we won't see that deform. So, I mean, this is obviously ridiculously simple, right? There's nothing exciting going on here. What we could probably do is resample this here. So if we resample this and give this a little bit more, give this a little more there. Let's see what we can do here. Yeah, sure. Something like that, I guess. Fine. Again, I'm not a rigging person, so this is not my forte. But what you could do here is you could select all of these, right? And you could do the translate on all of these, right? And you can actually have them all kind of twirl in like this, right? And what this is obviously going to do is kind of deform this all around. I guess if I probably smooth this out a little bit more, we're going to get some better look there. Okay, sure, something like that. A little bit better. But what we can do then is have this animate, right? Like so. So this is going to move around like that. I'm just trying to think. There should be if I do, just trying to think if I can change this. Yeah, maybe like that. No, because that's moving it away. I'm just trying to think of a way to easily have this kind of rotate all in on itself without overlapping. No, that's not doing it. Got to think about that one. All right, so let's just go back here. Yeah, for sure. Yep, the group could be that as well. So yeah, you could just clear this out. Just add one in here, do the group this way, and you could just rotate them all. Sure, for sure. Visually, you could do it in the viewport. You can do it this way, either way. So, so I think the tricky part here is how would you have this? basically how would this come back, come back into something where maybe you had this scattered throughout, a bunch of different points or whatever. I would think that you'd want to take some sort of this attribute and have it promoted up through, through this skeleton, for example, and have that be able to be offset basically in time or something like that, in order to kind of have these growing through there. It's kind of escaping me, honestly, at the moment, how maybe you would go about doing that. I'm trying to think exactly what that might be. I feel like if you had a motion clip and you offset it or something like that, that could certainly work, like a motion clip retime. Yeah, I feel like this would be something you could do. You could update, because a motion clip, just for an example, a motion clip, if you're not familiar with it, is a way to be able to do this. So let's just say you had an animation here, right? And it was, let's just say we started this. We'll just have it in a circle like this, and then we'll animate it here and go to whatever, 72 frames, and have it go to 0, and it goes straight up, right? So here's our amazing animation where it just kind of grows up like that, right? Turn this off. Cool. So there's our growing animation, right? So what you can do with a motion clip is take this, and it basically turns this into, it basically takes the time out of it, right? So it makes your animation into this whole long, you see every single frame of this kind of almost like an onion skin, right? If you've ever seen onion skin animation or whatever in an application, it almost brings it like that. So I think what you could do is almost take these motion clips, and if you scattered this maybe around with that KineFX on there, you could possibly offset that motion clip. Another thing that I'm just thinking of, which maybe is too complicated, is like agents, where you'd have multiple agents scattered around, and you could have those all randomly activate based on certain frames, from a crowd simulation type of a thing. I honestly, I can't say that I have a great answer for this, but those are all thoughts that kind of come into my mind as far as how you might go about doing some of those things in there, because what we could do here, this is all good, but you could do something like, let's see if there's a motion clip. Yeah, let's see here. So if we retimed this here, right, and did a range shift, we should be able to start the animation later. And then what you do is you do a motion clip evaluate, and this should bring it back into just its individual. Yep, exactly. So now we can see that we can adjust the frame at which this is being evaluated, right? So it's not actually animating until right there, right? So it animates at that point, right? So, and we can take something like this and, we could retime it to 24, something like this, and then it won't start animating until frame 24. So this might be a way that you could go about doing that with like a bunch of different elements. However, could be a little bit expensive to do that with a bunch of characters in there. And so possibly turning it into an agent would be a much easier process, because I actually was just watching a bunch of videos about this today, and a packed agent is basically a way to take a character and basically pack all of its information into a point, more or less, and then have that point drive how those animations go, and you can translate into different animation cycles or transition into ragdoll states, all sorts of different things like that. Let me see. There is an agent from rig. I wonder if we couldn't do this. Okay, let's do this. Let's give this a shot. Agent from rig. We'll say maybe plant 1. Cool. All right, so then what you have to do is you do an agent. Let me see if I can remember this. Agent layer, I believe. Here's our agent. And we want our shape geometry, and we need our capture pose, which is going to be, let me just check and see here. Yep, that's that. So then this is our capture pose, like so, right? Yeah, agents are definitely a little tricky. They're not the easiest things in the world. Okay, so we need a name on our shape geometry. So we'll just say name. Let's do this. We'll say, I don't know, grass, something like that. Okay, cool. So now we have our agent. We have one of those there, right? Okay. And then what we would need to do is agent clip. Yep. Okay. There we go. So this is exactly what we want. So we want to take this motion clip. So I think what we can do is just actually do this instead. Do that. And then we can do the agent clip. And if we drag this motion clip into here, we should have, let's see here. Dun, 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 dun. Clip name. Unroll. We don't actually need to create a motion. Okay, let's see. Hey, look at that. We got animation. Cool. Okay, so great. So we're getting somewhere here. Don't know where we're getting, but we're getting somewhere. Okay, so we have this random thing here. So what if we do an agent source? I'm so glad. No, that's not an agent source. It's a crowd source. That's what it is. I'm so glad I watched those master classes today. I was just randomly watching them and I was like, yeah, we'll see. Okay. Here we go. Let's see here. Let's do 100 of them. I don't know. Sure. And then what if we do randomize clip time? Hey, there we go. We've got something going on here. Okay, so what I probably would want to do here is just give myself this motion clip retime, right? Because we actually retimed it to be 24 frames later, right? So this will now make it so that if we do random clip offset, but why is that? Let's see here. Okay. Why are we getting these to be... Sorry, just trying to think of why these are getting... why these are going past... Because I would think that... No, that's not right. Sorry, just trying to think here. This is really interesting. You can use all sorts of things for the clips here. It's really interesting. You can use USDs, you could use chops, files, all sorts of things. I don't know why this isn't offsetting the way I would think it would. Is there an attribute in here that's driving this offset? No. Huh. Oh, that's terrifying. Didn't mean to go in there. I just don't understand what's driving these. And so what I'm trying to figure out here is why this seems like it's, oh, okay. So that's our issue here. So we want to retime this. So I don't know why this isn't. Why this is going as it is. Like, so the clip time here is evaluating, I would say, wrong. Like, it's not wrong, but it's just not what my clip is animating over here, where it doesn't start moving till 24. It's acting like the first one is the same. But I guess if we ignore that just for the moment, we can see that this is definitely doing something sort of interesting, right? Now, nope, should be unroll, not walk. Okay, so another thing you could do is randomize the heading, I think. Let's see. Maybe? Hello? I would think that this would change where these are pointing. One would think. Okay, that's working. Interesting. Why is the heading not randomizing? That's the question here. That is the question. Okay. Well, anyways, this is sort of, I think, getting us in an interesting direction here. Gives you a lot of kind of freedom to scatter things and stuff like that. So this might be an interesting thing to check out. The bigger problem here is that we don't have a good answer for how to specifically adjust the timing of this, like specifically run it across here. Probably would be some sort of a crowd simulation type of a thing, which, you know, might not be what you want to do. But for like a bunch of animated plants, like if you had a really complicated animation, it might be beneficial to go through this route. I mean, obviously I just have like a blade of grass here, but if you took something that was, you know, really, really dense, right? You know, you should be able to have this at very, you know, reasonable playback speeds and things like that. In fact, you can even have proxy geometry in agents. So kind of interesting. I don't know, you know, if this would specifically do anything for you, but that's one idea maybe there, you know, to take a look at. You I'd love if anybody has any other suggestions or any other thoughts. I mean, please feel free, drop those in the chat, because I'm trying to think about this kind of from a bunch of different directions, and I may have gone down some crazy rabbit hole that doesn't need to be gone down. I mean, this is certainly interesting to take a look at. I mean, agent stuff is really fascinating, and I was just looking at it today, so my brain's kind of there. I feel like kineffects would be just straight kineffects would be maybe a better way of doing it. However, I could see that being a very heavy operation, especially if you're doing it on a bunch of plants. So that's something to keep in mind as well. All right, Wallaby, I'll take a look at that and see if we can't figure out a way to kind of talk about that a little bit. The group, Wallaby's asking about the group expression node. So that's something certainly that we could chat about a little bit. So I think another thing that you could think about, there you go. There's a great suggestion from David. Hey, so you were saying to offset with offset in the string. I see what you're saying. Yep. So what David's suggesting is doing something quite a bit. Yeah, frame number. Yep. Yeah, I see what you're saying now, because it's a pack disk primitive. Yep. So what David is suggesting is going for a method that's a little bit different, and I don't even know if I've really ever really talked about it on the stream, honestly. But by the way, VFXman222 is David Torno in the stream. He's a someone I actually just met at SIGGRAPH, but also a great Houdini instructor as well. He teaches at Houdini School. So if you ever want to check out his stuff, highly recommend his courses and all that stuff. I've heard great things about them. I personally haven't done them myself, but I know that whenever I've heard him explain anything, it's been really good. So he's given me a little feedback here in the chat, which I greatly appreciate. Thank you, David. So another way that you could go about doing something like this would be let's see. So if we do a file node, I believe on here there is, yep, pack disk primitive, right? So the way that we go about doing this, let's see here. Hey, Sig, welcome to the stream. Yeah, exactly. It's more fun that way. That's kind of the whole point here, is that I don't have all the answers. So the more people that can have answers, the better. So let's do this. Let's, I think this is the smart way of doing this. So let's do this. So we'll, so let's bake this to, I think that's the right way to do this. So if we do a geometry output, save this to disk here. All right, so hip geo. Yep, that sounds good. We'll just say bending grass as the node name here, and we'll just, what frame does this go to? We'll give it to 84. So 1 to 84. So let's just do this. Delete channels, 84. Save that to disk. So now I think if we do this, bring in this file, point it to our geo here. Yep. So here is now a pack disk primitive. So let's see here. So we're going to clamp that, Dave? I'm trying to, I'm not sure, David, if there's a way to clamp that or not. But anyways, I think there is, but it's escaping me right now. But then what you would do basically is you would, oh, good point. Time shift. Yes, exactly. Yep. Thank you. Okay, so we'll just clamp to both, and we'll do this. Channels 84. We could also reference whatever the output there. Okay, cool. So there we go. Now we've got, this should clamp that down. Cool. So what we could do is, since this is just now a string here, right, that we're loading basically, we could do something like a grid and then scatter. And then copy to points. Okay, so we'll have this, and there we go. Got all of our grass blades moving around. And so these are all going to be going at the exact same frame, right? So what we could do is, let's see, what's the smartest way to do this? Probably putting some sort of a frame offset here maybe, and then just trying to think here. Yeah. So let's do this. We'll do a integer, attribute adjust integer, and we'll drop down a, we'll just say frame offset. And this way you could kind of control this however you wanted to. And let's do this as a random, and maybe we do it up to like, I don't know, 24, something like that, 0 to 24. So we should have our incoming offsets. We can actually, instead of having this apply to the points, we can add another one in here and add it to the primitives. The attribute be frame offset. There we go. So now we have our frame offsets in here. And then what we can do down here is we should be able to just do a prim wrangle here. I'm just going to hard code this in. I'm not going to go too crazy with this, but what we could do here is basically we have our frame offset. So let's just say int, just say offset equals I at frame offset, like this. And then what we should be able to do is, let's see. I mean, we could do some fancy stuff with like trimming off the strings and stuff like that, but I'm just going to code this in. So let's just say string. We'll just say temp path equals, and then we'll do sprint f. We'll just put this in there. I'm just going to copy this, just inspect it and copy it. So we're going to do everything up to there. Close that, come back down here. So there's the whole string. It's a whole crazy string, right? It's going to be maybe a little hard to see, but so there we go. We've got our string, and we're going to say, let's see. percent, what is it? I think should be an integer. Oops. Put the decimal point outside of it. And then it's bgeo.sc. I think that's right. That should get us there. And then what we need to do is basically put in the value for I here, which is going to be, I think I'll just say, okay, so I'm just going to do the offset here. Okay, that should be working or doing something. Actually, what we could do is just test this real quick and see what this is specifically doing. Yep, it's giving us our offsets there. So this is starting to do what we want it to. You can see that this temp path is got the right numbers, but it's not going to be changing, right? So that's something we want to adjust. And what we can do here is just say something like plus at capital F frame. And then what we could do here is just say clamp, I believe should work. And then we've got our value, and then we can just say the minimum and maximum. And in this case, it's just going to be 1 and 84, just to make sure that those numbers don't go outside of their respective values. And that looks right. Great. However, I am going to subtract 24 from this so that these all start at 1, and then they should offset because we gave it a 24 offset. So or a 24 randomization. So I'm just going to set it back 24. It's still clamped between 1 and 84. So that's good. We've got our integer offset here. That should all be working. And instead of doing this as temp path, what we can do is we can just say at path if we want to. We'll just write it right over that. How about that? So hopefully this will work. Let's see what's yeah, it's just unhappy about my casting there. Let's see. Nope. Why did that not work? Is it? What? Try the path in file 1. Here? You mean doing it like $hip and all that stuff? Is that what you're saying, David? I think that's what you're saying. I'm actually now thinking about this. I'm not sure. What I'm thinking is that we actually want to do this with the instance path, right? I think that is what we want to do. I think that's actually what we want to do. Let's just try this. I'm kind of curious. I feel like this is actually what we want to do. Maybe not. Oh, right. This needs to be done over points. There we go. That's what it is. Maybe? It's doing it sort of right, but I don't know why it's freaking out like that. Huh. It's a fun experiment. It is randomizing him. That might be something I did stupidly. Maybe because there's no normal attributes. That might be why. Let me try that. I'm doing this quickly and not thinking about it. There's my normals. Save those to disk. Curious. Interesting. Yes, because I've seen people. Who did I see that was using a method like this? I think Mark Fancher was actually using a method like this where you would have the instance path like load in your geometry, but why it's doing that black thing is absolutely beyond me. I'm sure there's a reason for this. Oh man. Yeah, good point. Good point. It does fix it. That's weird. Must just be something I did here it's not happy about. Oh yeah, lighting mode. Good point. Nope. It's doing something really bizarre here. What is it doing? Huh. Boy, it is jacked. That is so weird. Yeah, definitely unpacking it fixes it. But anyways, Pact has a mind of its own. Well, anyways, Davis. Yeah, so it could be, I'm sure, any number of things, but hopefully something like that makes a little bit of sense, because what you could do then is this is just randomly, offsetting these. Let's just do a few less so that I can do this a little more interactively. Maybe 300, something like that. Okay, so we've got these here, right? But what you could do instead is, instead of doing random, we could do a line, right? And if we hit enter here and just kind of move these around like so, now they should go from one side to the other, right? So I think this is probably your best bet, where you would create an animation and then be able to feed it into this type of a simulation. Now, obviously, you could do something like this with crowds as well. And in fact, the crowd workflow would be a much more robust thing long term. If you're thinking about wanting to have something that would grow, transition to different states, maybe go back and forth, do whatever, whatever you might want to do with it, that's going to be the most robust system, I think, to do something with agents and crowds. But in this case, this is obviously super, super robust. And since it's going to respect a lot of the instancing attributes and things like that, so we can actually just get rid of these. What we could do is do something like, you could use the labs instance attributes, which I think are awesome. You could drop those down, and then what did we do here? What did we break? Oh, interesting. Is this actually let's just throw this up above here. That should be fine. Yeah. So it just wanted to clean up incoming stuff. But there's some interesting things here. Instant path. Yeah. there's just some interesting things there. Actually, that's probably what it was. It was just creating that instance attribute here with these variants. It was trying to name your instances. But anyways, point transforms is kind of cool because you can do some different things here. So we could basically, we can spin it around, right? We could do random based, well, obviously that's the wrong axis, but if we do Y, we should be able to get randomized axes. You can see here with these little visualizers, and you could randomize the scale of them or do whatever. So this is kind of a nice way that you could do something, even more random, where these are all going to grow differently like that, but in a line. So this labs instance attributes is really, really nice for that. And obviously you could randomize the scale, maybe do it, I don't know, something like that, have a bunch of random sizes to it. And then we could even scatter more, something like that. And then we could get that cool black thing going. Pop, 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 pop. Yeah. Oh yeah. The instance attributes definitely works with copy to points as well, for sure. Hi, Peepoo. Nice to have you here. Yes, I am reading the chat. Hello. Yes, you could certainly use this with copy to points. What you would do there is, it would be the same. It would be the same concept where you would basically take your geometry, copy it to points, and then you could have these random scales and things like that. For example, just if we did something like this, box, copy to points, and I'll just take the same grid and scatter here, like so. There's all of our boxes, but then if we do instance, and then we could do all sorts of fun things here, like randomizing these, right? So maybe we wanted to make sure they're all the right size, so we can do that, right? Something like that. And then you can change, obviously, the noise. We could randomize, this is randomizing p-scale. Sorry, you could also randomize scale in multi-axis. So that's another option as well, where you could have it, make it longer or shorter. You could make it taller like that. So that's kind of interesting. Give that a different seed. So yeah, you're here to see what we can do with Houdini. What GPU do I have? I have a RTX 3090. So a previous generation graphics card. But graphics cards are not the only thing that matter in Houdini. CPUs are important as well. And honestly, most standard gaming rigs will be able to handle Houdini pretty well these days. So here is our random. There you go. So yeah, this will work for all sorts of different processes and things like that. In fact, probably what you'd want to do is do a match size here to be able to put this minimum to the ground. And yeah, there you go. Got some interesting little, some interesting buildings and things like that. Question, RAMs. You're asking me about my RAMs. How many dedicated RAMs do I have? I have 128 gigs in my computer, which is a decent amount, but you don't need to have that much. If you're doing simulation stuff in Houdini, the more RAM is usually better. If you're doing fairly standard stuff, a lot of vellum and things like that, 32 will get you by just fine. 64 obviously is better. But, the more you have, the happier these big programs will be. But my laptop, when I first got it, was 32, and it ran just fine. It would fill up sometimes, but it's not that crazy. I mean, it's pretty standard in the film industry and in the VFX industry to have, probably 256 in workstations these days. But yeah, the more RAM, the better. But it's just so that if I do something stupid, I don't get instantly punished. So there we go. There's some interesting instance workflow. I'm not sure why this weird black thing was happening here, but yeah, doesn't happen when it's unpacked. So guessing that wouldn't happen, and probably something dumb that I did here. Sig is just saying, I remember trying to do flip on 16 gigs university when I first started. Fun days. Yes. Yeah, 16 gigs would certainly be a little bit on the light side for doing something like flip. Anything that has a lot of like points or volume, really the volumetric stuff gets out of hand pretty quickly. You can have a lot of points without taking too much RAM, but it's really the volumetric stuff, I think, that starts to really eat away at a lot of RAM really quickly. Louis is saying this awesome random rotation of copies. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. You want to randomize the rotation, but keep their faces pointing in the normal direction. Yeah, this is exactly what you'd want to do. You can even change which specific thing it's looking at, whether it's looking at X, Y, or Z there. I mean, there's other ways you could obviously do this as well. There's other ways to randomize, but this is just a really nice little node. I mean, if you guys aren't using the labs tool set, or at least looking at them, there's always so many really cool things in labs. I mean, just for an example here, just to show you, they're really actually well organized too. Yeah, so we've got, these are all the different nodes in labs, and you can see there's just so many things in here. There's tons of stuff. If we just type, what am I doing? Sorry. If we just type labs, there's all the labs nodes. So there's quite a few. Look at them all. But yeah, they're always making different interesting tools and ways to kind of edit what you're doing. A lot of geometry stuff. Also, if you're working with real-time engines, it's huge to be able to use these tools. You'll notice a labs tool usually because it's like all one bright orange color or white. They're pretty much all orange, white, and this teal color, I think, for the most part, unless they're integrations with third party. So there's certain things that they'll integrate for, like, maybe some sort of, Alice Vision for like remeshing photogrammetry data. That's in there. There's these little black diamonds and stuff. But yeah, take a look at that. Pretty cool. Sig is just saying that they have 256 gigs of RAM on their workstations at their studio. And yeah, and then when you need to do the real stuff, you actually send that to the farm, to a render farm, because those have even more RAM available in them. Yes, QLib is amazing as well. I actually got to meet one of the guys that makes QLib, which was really cool. I had no idea I was going to meet them. It was I actually got to visit Weta in New Zealand, and apparently he works there, and he was just the person touring me around was like, hey, this person makes QLib. And I was like, oh, do you too? Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, QLib is amazing. Yeah, I don't know the whole team or whatever, but yeah, it's one of the people. I was like, oh, hey, cool. Nice to meet you. Yeah, that's those labs tools are amazing. QLib is a really great thing as well. You'll see this up in my in my menus and things like that, networks. You can see there's a QLib thing up here as well. And there's just lots of nice little tools and presets that they load in for you, which are really, really great. Like in the transform node, for example, there's all these there were some of these things that they added in here. There's other ways of doing that at this point, or even like in time shift, it comes with a bunch of presets here that are like hold first frame, hold last frame, accurate. I don't know what that actually means, but loop frame range, things like that. So those are all really great tools, and great little quality of life additions to it. AElib is another one too that I would recommend. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to get a drink. So Louise asking about, we're on the RAM subject. What's the best way to have a lot of copies on an object without exploding your computer? Well, that's this concept of packing, right? And I could try to, pack geometry is certainly, I'd say, the way to go. And that's kind of the concept in Houdini. So I'm going to bring up this, the documentation for that, because I think it's pretty interesting to see it actually. So let me just bring this up, and I think this will be pretty interesting. So this is from the help documentation. However, hopefully this will make some sense to you, but when we're instancing stuff, basically you want to have, optimize memory, right? So what we do is we have this concept of packing, and basically that can take the entire model or whatever and just instance it around in your scene and only have to store the main thing once in memory, right? So here you can see we've got 8,000 polygons or whatever. That's a megabyte, right? And when we want to copy it around in the scene, if we had to copy it, 4 times or whatever, that's going to be 4 megabytes. In this case, though, when you pack into a pack primitive and instance that around the scene or copy it around the scene, each of those is only going to take 400 bytes in this case, or whatever, it might be, the overhead on that. But this is the idea of being able to use this packed format to be able to optimize your memory. So for example, here in this copy to points, we have this right here, this pack and instance, right? And so in this case, it's not going to be as beneficial because we're doing some weird scaling. No, I think it should still work because it's really just scaling the geometry that we're inputting. And so what this does basically is, if we look at it, we now have 600 packed geometries, right? And what that's telling us is that we have, and if you look here too, we have 600 of everything, right? 600 points, 600 primitives, 600 vertices, 600 packed geos, because this data now lives on points, right? So if we were to look at our scene here now, each of these geometries does not have its own individual points. It is all stored on one point. This is similar to what you do in like rigid bodies, for example, where those are, they're all represented by one point. It's kind of the same idea there, where you're packing geometry to be able to make it more efficient, be able to manipulate it a lot easier. And in this case, we're just manipulating points, right? And that's why that's kind of goes hand in hand with kind of putting the attributes on those points when you're copying them, right? So that's all kind of goes together. And if we look at our primitives here, there's actually this interesting intrinsics thing that you might not often go into, but these actually in here, you can see there's things like packed, right? And so it'll actually say like what the packed transforms are for each of these, what the packed full transform are. So there's our packed full transform. So each of these individual points has all of this transformation information stored on them. And these are all kind of stored in this case, on the primitives. And so there's one point that defines each of these packed geometries, and all that data gets stored way more efficiently. So I think that's certainly what you're going to want to look to if you're looking at a lot of copies of an object without, like you said, exploding your computer. Similarly, you can do there's a similar concept that you can do in Solaris with an instancer, and that is a little bit different. I can just show you that real quick. That's a little bit of a different thing here, but we'll just do this. We'll say Solaris. And if we do a box like so, and I'll just do a match size because there's a match size in here as well. And we'll just minimum. There we go. Cool. And then if we do a instancer in here, this is going to error out at first because you got to dive inside, and we're going to do, actually, no, we can do the same thing we did over here. Sorry, it was under here. Let's grab these. So this is sort of the USD way, the Solaris USD way of doing this, but we've got our same information in here. We've got a grid, right? We scatter some points on it and then add our instance attributes, right? So there's our instance attributes. And then if we jump up here, what we can do is we can, instead of putting this into this first input, which should be our stage, basically everything that's in our scene, what you can do is move this over to the prototypes. And now we're getting instance geometry over here. And what I can do, probably should change this to 1 because I think that's the problem. So now this is actually a USD version of this same process. And I'm just going to change over to Solaris real quick, just because this will be a little easier to see. Milk, you were just asking where I learned this software. I learned actually at my previous job. I kind of learned on the job and then did a bunch of online learning, training, tutorials, things like that. If you're looking to learn Houdini, just a little plug for David there, who was kind of giving me some suggestions. Houdini School is a great place to learn all sorts of different beginner or intermediate topics, get yourself up and running. There's lots of great places to learn online if you're looking for that. Also, obviously, universities out there that have great programs and things like that. So anyways, this is kind of the USD way of doing that exact same setup, right? And what this does is this is going to put down a point instancer. Basically, it saves a bunch of attributes on each of these points. So for example, we have, the USD thing is more just for completeness. I'm not saying this is the best way to do what you're wanting to do, but just to give you an idea of what it's like, I guess. But here you can see that all these attributes get saved on your instancer. So you got a bunch of like, for example, here's all your P scale values, here's all your scale values, and what's the other things here? Orientations, positions, things like that. And then the prototype is basically just the piece that you're copying, more or less. And so this is how you would do an instancer in Solaris. And this should scale pretty well, for you. Like, I think if you did this at like 100 by 100, did something like, I don't know, 5,000. No, let's do more. 50,000. Yeah. You can do a ton of copying and things like that. So, so obviously USD is made for huge scenes. It's not. Oh, the normals look weird in the USD version because I'm using actually a USD primitive here. This is actually like you're defining a cube in here, right? So that's why the normals are all funky. This is just like their weird defined cube. But if I did like a SOP create, right? This is where you can make a little SOP network, go inside and just do a box instead. And there's my box, right? Normal type box. We come back up here. Here's my box. Did I not do normals? I didn't. I think it's because that one didn't have normals on it. So let's see here. Maybe not. I don't know. Also, don't forget that this is a lighting context as well. So it could be that there's no like dome light in here or something stupid. This is editing. It never works live. Yeah, that's okay. I'll just see what happens here. Yeah, that looks a little nicer. Yeah, the normals are a little funky. Not sure what's up there with that. If I throw this in here instead. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it was probably just that the normals aren't in there. That's what it was. So this with no lighting was a little... Oh, there it is. Now it's fine. Get out of here. Yeah, so it was just that was a primitive basically that was coming in. And it was a defined USD box basically. Just like you can have... Anyways. There's no audio? Hello? Hopefully you can hear me okay. Sorry if there's no audio. Well, if you're running into problems over on YouTube, jump on over to Twitch. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Sounds like everybody else is doing okay. Sorry about that, Gers. Hopefully you can get that figured out. Welcome to the stream, though. So, anyways, that's just the USD way of doing the same thing. So there's plenty of different ways in Houdini to kind of talk about, instancing large amounts of data. Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know why that would be having an issue. Let me just check. Let me just check my restream, make sure I'm good here. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's throwing any errors here on my end, so not sure what that is all about. If anybody else is, yeah. Oh, weird. Well, thanks for checking, everybody. I know it's kind of hard for me to check. It's always very strange. It's like, what is working, what isn't. Maybe it's your PC, bro. You need more RAM. You need 256 gigs of RAM. That's how you get that good streaming going. Anyways, well, cool. There you go. There's a little sense of how some different instancing works. Lalo is asking, every time I do a file cache, do I need to then add a file node to read the cache I just did, or can I continue without it? Oh, you're very welcome, Louis, about your instancing question. No problem. So yeah, Lalo, no, when you do file cache, you don't need to have a file node after it. So let's just look at kind of how that file cache works. Let's see here. We'll do geometry and we'll just do something interesting. So let's do a file cache. Let's do some sort of a simulation. What would be an easy thing? Flip. Let's do a flip. Flip configure flip. Let's do a flip configure flip. Boop, 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 boop. And this has a file cache in it already. Hooray. Okay. So what we're doing here is we have a melting flip, basically, that he goes down and melts, right? So if we wanted to cache this, we can use this file cache node here. And this is the file cache 2.0. This is a little bit different looking than, if you're in a previous version. I think before 19, it was a little different. But the really nice thing about this is that it actually has two different kind of ways to cache your data, and it'll really nicely construct your file paths for you. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that helps with the pathing and things like that. I think it's in all these different parameters basically help format your file path, which is really nice. So really all you have to do is worry about this base name, base folder, and that can really do most of it for you. Also over here, you've got your BGO or VDB. So BGO is Houdini's like native geometry format. So that's what we'll just stick with. But so what you do here is when you go to cache this, you check a few things, right? Is it time dependent? If it's not time dependent, you can turn that off and it'll just save one frame. But if it is time dependent, you go down here and you've got information for your sequence. If it's not a simulation, meaning it's not something that has to happen frame by frame, but say it's some sort of a geometry conversion or something where you're inputting geometry that's already on disk, converting it, saving it back out. You can actually turn this simulation off, and it should be able to, if you do the save to disk in background, I think it'll run more instances. You'll see a little top network with the little dots come up on the file cache in a second, and more dots will be active. But we're doing a simulation, so we're going to keep that on. And that should really be about all that you need to do by default, unless you really need to get into something tricky. But so what we'll do is we'll save this to disk in background. And one thing you'll notice here is that the second I did that, it checked this load from disk right here. So this is the way to make sure that your data is being loaded from disk, because actually inside of this file cache node, there's one node that's writing it out, and then there's another node that's reading it back in. This is actually this is an HDA, right, where you've got other nodes inside of it. So like if we click inside here, there's other stuff happening inside of here. In fact, you can see right here is your render and your read. So those are actually the nodes that are doing all the heavy work, right? And so we have a top network inside of there, all these different things, and it's writing this stuff all out. And the reason that this file cache in this mode is so nice, and I think I've talked about this a couple times in the past, is that, normally if you were saving something to disk in the good old days, olden days, whatever you want to say, you'd have to wait. You just have a little thing on screen and it would just hold up your machine. But now I'm able to go around and do whatever I want to in here while this is caching. Granted, it's taking up some performance and things like that. If we look at my task manager here, everything's crunching and running and my CPU's going, but there's still a little extra. And so what I can do is I could go in here and look at my particle fluid surface and actually let that load in, right? And I can actually see what's happening here, right? So this is actually surfacing this live. So that's actually not what I should probably be doing. Let me do another particle fluid surface. Oh, actually, I don't even need to. I'll just keep this as is. So what we can do is we can convert this to particles instead. We'll just keep it as particles because this will basically just convert it back. This fluid compress node, what this does is actually compresses it into a couple VDBs and some packed geometry and stuff like that. And then this file cache saves this packed geometry and compressed geometry basically, and then you can read it back out using this particle fluid surface. But now we've got that cache to disk. Our scene was active the whole time, and we have our melting flip. So yeah, that's kind of how this new file cache node works. It's really nice. And you also have versions in here too. So if we wanted to go to version 2, you could make a new version. And you can see that now, because this is saying load from disk, there's nothing here to load. So it's not giving me anything. So if I uncheck this now I'd be back to not loading from disk and just having my simulation kind of flow through here, or my data flow through. So just to show you the difference here, if I click this button here, this is what the old kind of style of caching was, and now everything's locked out. I can't really go and do anything in my UI. So we'll just interrupt that and let it go away. And I'm going to go back to version 1. So the question is that Lalo's asking if you change anything after the cache, you need to cache it again. Okay, you mean before the cache? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that would definitely be what you would want to do. So for my use, like say I was doing something like this with this flip solver here, right? And let's just say I wanted to, I've got this cached out. I've got flip coming in and all that stuff, right? But let's just say I didn't want to do that and I wanted to, let's just come up here, add a switch in. And let's do our pig head. And we'll switch over to that. Switch over to the pig head. I'm not sure. I think this will be fine. I don't know what that's doing. It's making him weird colors, but that's fine. We'll just let it do its thing. Right. So if I go to... what is it? Test geometry. We're in the OpDefs. Pig head. There we go. We've got color, I guess. I don't know what's happening there. Ugh. I hate it. Kill it. So say I wanted to do that. That's just so disturbing looking. So say I want to do that. Well, now, right, I've got that cache in the way. So it's going to just read back that cache. So like I said, the really nice thing about this file cache is that you could do something like another version. So say you wanted to change something in another version you wanted to run. Okay, so let's save this to disk in the background. We'll let this kind of spin up. And this is going to start saving out oh, right. It already loaded that geometry, and that's why I'm like, what's it doing? Yeah, there we go. So we just had to hit reload because we had already loaded that in before. But so now here's our melty pig. Ugh, it's horrible. And you can see that now this is loading in. So yeah, exactly. You need to recache based on what what you've changed upstream. The one thing to keep in mind here is that I think if I click this, it's going to open the directory. Thank you. So one of the nice things here is that this is actually going to, now while this one went just into my Q&A session, blah, 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 the file cache is actually really smart, and it makes different versions here. So this is my version 1 file cache. This is my version 2 file cache. So it's really clean with how it makes these folders. So it does some really nice stuff for you kind of in the background on your in your file folders and stuff like that. So yeah, file cache is so nice to use these days. It's great. So highly recommend that. Caching things, especially after simulations, is just one of those kind of automatic workflows that you run into in Houdini where you want to just, cache it out, drop it down, whatever. So that's always a great way to give yourself little checkpoints where it doesn't have to reprocess everything above it. Because that's something to think about with Houdini, right? Is that it's live, right? Everything's live. So when you reopen a project and you have a sim in it, well, you have to resim it. So really when you're simulating something, you want to have that cache to disk so that the next time you open it up, you don't have to do that step again. It doesn't have to live in RAM. It doesn't have to use those system resources. Disk space is a little cheaper than a ton of RAM. So, you use your disk space to save some of these things out. So Louis, you've got another question here. I'm currently learning Houdini. I'm coming from Cinema 4D. Same, me too. That's where I came from. Already learned a lot of things regarding the SOP context, vellums, attributes, VOPs, VAX, volumes, blah, blah, blah. It's pretty clear in my mind how those things work, but now I'm a bit lost on what would be the next thing to learn. Maybe fire simulation, flip, soft rigid body simulation. Honestly, I would say, and I think, David and I actually had this conversation in a couple meetings, but like, I think you've kind of gone about it the right way, right? Learning about attributes is huge. Learning about the SOP, just working with geometry in the SOP context is huge. Vellum is a great simulation to kind of get your head around, right? Because it's points, attributes. If you've watched any of my more recent videos, you've seen that where, we've got, we're kind of taking these attributes, putting it into a solver, and then the solver uses those attributes to kind of define how things are working, right? So I think you're on the right track, right? If you're understanding those things, I think you really kind of have done yourself well. I would say any of those honestly are probably fine to do next. I think rigid bodies for me is really easy to understand because ultimately a rigid body simulation is just a point simulation. Really, when you get down to it, it's all packed, or most of the time it's packed geometry. In the current way that you work with it, it's all packed geometry that you're working with. So that makes it a little bit easier to kind of see constraint networks and different things like that. I think it makes a little bit more sense. I think rigid bodies might be a great thing to kind of walk in, get into and kind of mess around with. I think flip and fight. I think soft body, soft bodies and vellum should be pretty straightforward if you've done things in vellum. So that I wouldn't say is really that far off. Fire and flip are a little bit different because for fire, obviously you're dealing 100% with volume. So you have to really kind of abstract away a bit of your ability to just easily poke at what the data is doing in the solver, right? Because the pyro simulations are, voxel based, right? And so you have to kind of know what your fields are sort of doing. You need to use a lot of visualizers and things like that. Flip is half particle, half volume. So you're maybe halfway there, but flip has a ton of gotchas, I feel like, especially in the surfacing side of things. So there's that. Pops is another, David just said pops is another great thing to get into, just to kind of understand a little bit more about, if you want to get into the DOPS context and actually work with, that side of things. Pops is a great entry point because you're, again, just using particle, points and forces and things like that. So, And the pop nodes are so easy to work with. I just love them. But the nice thing is that anything that's point based in a solver can use those pop nodes to kind of be able to manipulate them, which is really nice. And a lot of those can work with the RBD tools, so that's kind of nice as well. So, so David says, in that order, don't change, don't even think about it, don't change at all. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So, so there you go. There's a couple bits of advice. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a good path forward. But no, it's certainly, I think you're on the right path. Yeah, so simulations can be tricky, and I think the real beauty of having these SOP based solvers nowadays makes it so that you can way more easily analyze what's going on inside of your solvers and things like that. When you look at something like let's see, I'm just going to rename this. I know what the heck I did that for. So when you look at something in here, right? So we've, in that 2 clicks right there, in that double click, we've dove in like 4 levels deep, and now we're in the dynamics context. You can see it right here. So this is DOPS now. And we've talked about this a little bit before, but yeah, when your data changes over to your geometry spreadsheet changes over to this view, your brain kind of has to go, what just happened here? What am I looking at? Because now you're in a totally different world, right? And really you have this new kind of concept of objects with data attached to it, right? So it's a little different than points with data attached to it. It's just a little bit of a different way of going about things. But usually in here, like if I'm working with flip, if I go into my geometry right here, my geometry spreadsheet, I'm going to see a lot of the things I'm familiar with, right? So here we're going to see some of these things like p-scale and all of our point attributes and things like that. So this is a little bit of a different way of viewing it, but we can see here that we're getting a visualization of, this is actually a field, which is, I think this is our collision field that's being visualized in the purple. So here you can see we have a collision field. So this is a totally different way of viewing some of these pieces of data. Here it shows you their divisions and the size of it and things like that, but you're talking about voxels, so we don't really have a geometry spreadsheet for voxels, because if you have 30 billion voxels in a scene, that would be a little bonkers. But yes, this is, yeah, exactly. It can be a little overwhelming, but you don't have to get into this level of detail, right? This is just what exists in there, right? So really when you're doing simulations, like especially a flip simulation, it really is just have an object, have some sort of a source, have a solver, and then some forces that work on it, maybe a couple colliders. That's usually the workflow that exists within a solver, basically. And if you do something like for example, let's just do something really dumb and easy. Let's just do a sphere. And if we were to use, say, one of the shelf tools here, this is still kind of a good way to let's just do like a sphere emitter or something, call it something like that. And then if we just control click on this, we don't have a fluid object, but this is gonna set up our normal. This is putting it into my pop sim. So I actually had another DOP network in here, so it was trying to create. It's the weirdness of DOP networks, but it tried to put it into. Tried to put it into its own spot, but that's fine. This is literally the extent of emitting fluid, right? So if I turn this off and just go back here, and just hit play, we should, oh yeah, we don't have any gravity in here. So I'll just add in a gravity force. And there we go. We've got a flip sim going here, right? So really all that you don't have to freak out about it. It's just data that you can read and see what's going on. But this is really the extreme, the extent of making a flip sim, right? You have a flip object, you have a volume source, flip solver, and then some forces to act on it. And that's DOPS. Like that's how DOPS works, right? It's a little different, but that's kind of the concept of it. So anyways, I think if you start getting into some of these concepts, that'll be good. Obviously work with the SOP solver stuff first, and then you can kind of go from there, and continue to, yeah. Oh, interesting. Gers is just saying that the sims and SOPs used to confuse me when I was just starting. Yeah, it depends on what it is. I think the flip sims and SOPs are more confusing than flip sims and DOPs personally, but that's because I've been doing flip sims and DOPs for a lot longer. Man, there's so many acronyms. So let me just explain kind of what the concept is here, because you're asking what's the difference between the object and the source. So in this case, our object is kind of this place where this data gets stored, right? So here's our flip fluid object. Don't worry about all this nonsense, but here's our object, right? And what this source is going to do is this is going to kind of inject information into that object for the solver to kind of work on. That's the best way I think you can kind of think about it, because every frame. Yeah, David's in the same boat. Yeah, I think it's just a little strange to work with flip and SOPs. I mean, I think there's some stuff you can do in there that are like interesting, that on a totally different thing, like custom domains that are weird shapes, like that stuff you can't do in DOPs very easily, but you can do it in SOPs way more easily. So there's some interesting things there, but it definitely takes a little bit more like wrapping your brain around it. But, these sources add stuff in. There is usually a pattern to it. I mean, this is similar to how, this is, the object and the source. Yeah, exactly. That's the pattern. Exactly. So it's the same thing with, if you were going to do Vellum, in DOPS, you'd have a Vellum object, you'd have a Vellum solver, and then you'd source some Vellum geometry. Or in the case of Vellum, sometimes you don't even need to have a source, because you might just have an initial state, in there. So that's a little bit of a different way to deal with it. Some of them you need to set up constraint networks, like for Vellum, that can be the tricky part, right? Like if you need to manipulate constraints, that can get a little funky. There's some different things that can get weird when you're setting up DOP networks. Actually, the constraints for Vellum are set up beforehand, but I'm thinking of like rigid bodies and things like that. There can be some weird constraint stuff, but that's why you kind of go through these steps, like David was saying. Like, you don't just jump in and be like, I'm gonna do I'm gonna blow up an entire Earth and have like a full global scale nuclear blast simulation that I'm gonna do from scratch with all custom everything, and just go to town, and that's going to be the first thing I do. No, you do small things. You don't try to go think crazy outside of the box. That's next week, right? We're going to redo the Oppenheimer movie next week in an hour or two. It's super easy. There's just a button for it. So these are things. So these are all things that are just, you kind of walk before you run, right? And that's exactly what we're dealing with here, right? So I think what you'll see is that this kind of pattern, like you're starting to see, will continue on and on into the future. And there's a bunch of different concepts in DOPS that can be really hard to understand, and the SOP stuff kind of holds your hand through that. And then once you get to the point where you're like, man, I can't make this SOP solver do everything, or this SOP version of this to do everything you want to. Well, then that's when you have to jump in and start really getting your hands dirty in the dynamics world, and actually use some special solvers and things like that. But again, walk before you run. You don't want to, get into crazy stuff and then have to try to, figure something out that you're, light years ahead of where you should actually be at the moment. So there's our particle fluids. That's kind of the interesting thing about these DOPS tools as well, is that because we're having to go back and forth between DOPS and SOPs, these tools end up making a bunch of different geometries that merge in from the dynamics. So like this DOP import, this is something you used to see all the time everywhere when you're doing simulations. Now that kind of lives deeper inside of deeper inside of these other SOP tools, it's still happening in there. It's still happening in the background, but this stuff is a little bit more managed for you with, say, something like rigid bodies or pyro, different things like that. So these things still exist in there. When you're using SOPs, when you're using these SOP tools, you're still using a dynamics network inside of it. It's just you don't have to poke at it and get freaked out and feel like you're losing your mind. So yeah, those things are still in there, and they're obviously not going anywhere because that's why they were created. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a little sense for how, how some of those things work, but also, what the differences are and kind of those patterns, like you were saying. So cool. Yeah, you're very welcome, Lee. Thanks for the questions. Love it. That's why we're here. Yeah, so if you guys have any other questions, I'm happy to continue going. Happy to just chat a little bit more, but certainly that's this is awesome. This has been really cool to just have a little chat session. Yeah, I love this. It's always fun. I mean, honestly, any one of these streams I'm totally fine with turning it into just a chat session and just hangout kind of thing. That's half of the reason it's called Houdini Hangout, because I want to have people communicate back and forth, because obviously I'm the only one that has the microphone for the stream, but not being able to communicate back and forth is kind of silly. It's nice to be able to chat and yeah, anyways. So Lalo is asking, what's the difference between doing fluid sims with Vellum and Flip? Been using Vellum more, but wanted to know your take on it. Well, let me take a drink first and then I'll answer you. Here's what I would say. And I'm sure other people have differing opinions on, not differing opinions, but maybe have different ways of thinking of this. But for me, Vellum is really, the Vellum fluids are good for small scale splashes and maybe 0G fluids and different things like that, where you're kind of trying to really bend physics and kind of just do something abstract, do something interesting, sort of small scale. That's really, I think, where the Vellum fluids shine. They aren't particularly physically accurate. And not in the sense of like, it doesn't work the way a fluid works, but it doesn't have kind of all of the bells and whistles that something like Flip is able to approximate with fluids. So Flip is where you're going to get into, I'm not going to say only large scale fluids, but it doesn't do great on really small scales. That's where I think you really can run into some real problems with Flip. Now there's ways to get around that, and there's different shortcuts and kind of workarounds that people have for working with small scale Flip sims, and it's possible. But I think that is usually a good way of thinking about it. Are you doing, Niagara Falls? Are you doing a boat going through the ocean? Are you doing a spaceship rising out of a lake? Those are all examples of using Flip. If you have a strawberry that maybe is like spinning around in space and then like a big splash hits it in the back, and then it morphs into something else, that sounds like that could be Vellum, right? Because I think a lot of times when you're doing more motion graphics-y stuff, you have all these different things that are interacting together, right? You might have like soft bodies and fluid and cloth maybe that all need to work together. Well, that's Vellum. Vellum can have all of those things in the same solver, whereas Flip, it's going to be a lot harder to have those interactions. See Way of Water if you'd like to see the difficulties of doing multi interactions. They actually rebuilt, like they did their own solver so that they could have fluid, cloth interactions and all this stuff, and it's like crazy. It's just insane. But let's see. I also heard that when doing fluid sims with Vellum, you can make interactions between objects better. Yeah, exactly. Vellum things with Vellum, exactly. Yeah, you did a strawberry. I've actually done a strawberry splash with Flip too. So before Vellum existed. So yeah, you could do it either way. But that's funny that I've done that as well. So how funny. Okay, Louis. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. No, so, no, I don't do Q&As every Wednesday, but I do stream every Wednesday around this time. I'm going to be kind of switching back and forth to do earlier and later streams so that it's not so late in certain places. Like maybe like for me, it's like almost 10 p.m., but, and I'm sure it's like 2 a.m. or whatever, where you are. But like, if I jump and do them at 6 p.m. my time, that makes it a little easier for some people to do it. So I'm going to kind of jump back and forth, I think, from time to time and do them earlier and later. So, but thank you for being a part of the stream. Really nice to have you and great questions. So thanks. So yeah, Lela, hopefully that answers your question and makes sense, but yeah, that's cool. Yeah. The interactions are huge. So no problem. So I think, Johan, had a question that said, is it okay in Solaris to not export any asset to USD and just render everything by importing from SOPs? Or should I set up layers and component builders, etc.? So that's a great question, because I think a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, I have to know everything about USD just to be able to get a render out. And while it's super helpful to know about USD, to have better control over Solaris, not a requirement. If you're not setting, if you're just working on your own, you don't have to use the component builder to import your geometry in order to make it perfectly organized and set up all these variants and stuff. Now, that could be useful to you. That certainly could be a tool set that you could use. However, it is definitely not a requirement. I just did a render for an internal company image contest, and I just did a bunch of SOP imports, made sure that it was organized well, named well, and just kind of rendered it. And that worked fine. You don't have to go through all of the hoops that you see studios go through if you're doing it just as a freelancer. But no, if you're a student and you're learning, you want to know how those things work. You should at least explore them, because those are going to be really important things to start learning how to work in a pipeline in a studio. I get to talk to a lot of studios. I get to talk to a lot of, educators and institutions and online schools and all sorts of stuff. And those are kind of, that's one skill that a lot of people are saying, like industry saying, hey, I really want people that know how to use USD, know how to use Solaris. And schools are like trying to help kind of facilitate that and feed people into the industry for that. So it's not a requirement, but depending on what your use cases are, the more organized you can be, the better. It's always going to be the case in USD. And the more ahead you think, the more you're thinking ahead towards the end of it, it's just super helpful. Okay, gee, thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's just different. It's a different way of doing things, right? It's a different way of kind of, chatting and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I'm glad you enjoy it. It's fun too. I love just questions everywhere. It's great. Keeps me on my toes and makes me have to think a little bit. But yeah, so Johan, hopefully that answers your question. I mean, even for small studios, I think there's could be benefits to incorporating more and more USD workflows. I mean, there's so many tools that use USD nowadays. I mean, Unity, Unreal, Maya, obviously Houdini. I mean, Cinema can import it. I don't really know how well it can work with it. I haven't used it in a while, but I think even Blender's getting USD support. There's so many things out there that work with it. I mean, NVIDIA Omniverse is all USD. So it's such a huge thing in the industry right now. And like, if you went to SIGGRAPH, it's like 8 out of 10 presentations said the initials USD at some point. I mean, the USD birds of a feather, which is usually just a small group of people chatting, was like 200 people. So it's like, it's just everywhere. So the more that you can at least be aware of it, the better, because there are these idiosyncrasies to it. But once you know those, it kind of the scales fall from your eyes and you're like, oh, okay, now I know Kung Fu. Now I can see the Matrix. It's like there's this real kind of not superpower, but it really gives you the ability to start to look deeper into what's going on, especially with pipeline stuff. When you hear people talking about that, it becomes a little less crazy. Yeah, I mean, Johan, the good news is everybody's still learning USD. So it's just, where are we on? It's a spectrum of learning, and no one has gotten to the end yet. So I think there may be some person in a basement at Pixar somewhere that might know 95% of what USD does, but I don't think there's anybody that has the whole thing in their head. So just like Houdini, nobody has all of Houdini in their head. There's not one human in the world. So you'll never be there. So don't even worry about it. But yeah. So, but yeah, USD, that's obviously been a big part of my kind of learning recently, or my learning and course stuff that I've put out. So, Johan, if you haven't seen my USD courses, there's a, let me pull it up here real quick. Actually not real quick. It'll take me 1 second because I have to open up a different tab, but, copy that. I'll drop it in the chat here. So that is the playlist from my USD in Solaris presentation. I've done 3 courses on that in the past year or so. Yeah, exactly. Component Builder. Yeah, Component Builder was a first step at making things work a bit easier for people to not have to, set up assets from scratch every time. If you go inside of the Component Builder and look what it does, which I've had to do to kind of be able to understand exactly what it's doing, it's intense. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on in there. So the Component Builder is a high level tool, right? And so yeah, it's going to keep getting love and more hopefully easier and easier workflows. That's Solaris has a huge amount of development time going into it. So for sure. Yep. 100% have had that conversation. And actually, if you are, I don't know, there will be, yes. So skeleton stuff and character stuff in USD are definitely really tricky. I guess I could probably do a stream on that. I've not discovered, but I was explained a pretty good way of being able to import skeletons and animation into USD in a way that makes it really light. Because the tricky part with USD is that it wants to write out every point position when there's deforming geometry. So if you have a huge character that's all rigid, this is a conversation that so Ninehole was in a instructor's kind of meeting with me online a few weeks ago. But if you have something that's all rigid and it's characters and it's moving around, you want it to only be changing its transformation data and not writing out every point position every frame, right? That's just tons of data that's totally wasted, and your characters turn into hundreds of gigs of caches on disk, and it's just stupid. So you need a way to be able to optimize that. And so we were trying to investigate that a little bit for USD. So maybe I could do I could touch on that in a stream at some point. But anyways, yeah, it's definitely some stuff. I'm going to just go back and see where it was. Okay, I'm just going to answer this Solaris thing. Lalo, I saw your message there. I'm going to get back to that, but I'm just going to answer this next Solaris thing since that's where my brain is. The only thing I don't like with Karma and Solaris is lack of features of Material X for more procedural workflows, but that's up to the devs of Material X. Yes, well, Material X is an open source thing, and so the developers of that are the people that are willing to contribute to it, right? And one of the nice things is that Side Effects is a contributor to Material X at this point. So the stuff that we're making for Karma specifically, as much as we can, we are giving that back to the Material X team and saying, here, this is a great feature. Let's implement this. Here, this is something that's needed. Let's implement this. And that's going to help us, but also help the wider industry as a whole. I mean, as Unreal has USD Material X in it now, and as other DCCs have that as an adoption into their software, that'll be better and better. So yeah, that's something we know for sure. And again, like I said, Solaris has a lot of development hours being put at it. And I think in the coming releases, there'll be some really positive things going forward. So I can't say anything, obviously, but I think there'll be some good steps each release. So I think it'll be good. So Lalo, you were asking about, is there a difference when learning doing sims for film and video games? Or as long as you know how to use Houdini, you're good to go on those industries? So yeah, I have never worked in a video game company, to be fair. So I can't specifically speak to that on every level. But what I have learned, and maybe if there's other people that work in the game industry, they're more than welcome to drop a thing in the chat, comment in the chat. But I think the difference between film and games, and this is kind of my observation from going to conferences like SIGGRAPH or GDC. GDC is the Game Developers Conference, if you're not familiar with it, and SIGGRAPH is for film and TV and huge projects. And I've gone to a few other ones this past year and in between. And so when you go to something like SIGGRAPH or FMX or these conferences where they're talking about the really technical stuff, what you hear in film and TV is like, we had this much, computing power to be able to make this explosion happen. And we had to just trim it back just a little bit so that it would actually happen, and our computers could actually process it, and we can actually get to the end of it, right? That's kind of how the film industry works. It's like, here's 100% of our computing power. We're going to figure out how to do this with 99% of it, right? And that's kind of always why, you're like, well, why aren't these films like getting faster or whatever? Well, it's because now instead of just worrying about the character, we're starting to think about the muscles and the blood flow through them and how the pores on their face are deforming and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, you always go further and further and further and further just because there's so much processing power out there, right, that you can kind of grab and take hold of. The games industry, I think, is a little bit different in that you have all of these resources of these monster computers, but you also can't just build it so that there's only 10 computers in the world that can run this game. It has to be made so that there's millions of computers out there that can run this game, right? So the idea with video games is usually that you have to figure out how to optimize and optimize and optimize and optimize to get to a point where you can hit a certain percentage of, computer, that are out there in the world. So like, for example, or phones, smartphones. I was watching a talk at GDC where they were talking about the Lego game on a mobile phone, and they had these full models of their Millennium Falcon, for example, and they had it all made out of pieces and stuff like that. And they're like, well, this is great, but it's too much geometry. It's too much for an iOS. And it's just this little tiny like Millennium Falcon that's not like this, 3,000 piece kit. It's maybe 100 pieces or something like that. But all the little studs on the top of it was too much. So they had to figure out a way to optimize the rendering of those studs. They actually use Houdini for it, which is really cool. But they figured out how to optimize the rendering of these studs so that it would work on a mobile phone, and it like improved the performance by like 100 times. And it was like optimizing the shape of these studs or whatever, just in real time. But it's kind of the same thing with simulation, right? You can have a fluid simulation with, 100 billion particles in it and have this huge ocean scene battle with boats flying everywhere and all this crazy stuff. And that's great for film and TV. But then when you get to games, you have to really do a lot of approximations and kind of fiddle with things and make sure that this is compressed properly and all these different things. So it is a little different the way you have to deal with certain things. Now, like something like a pyro sim, if you wanted to bring a Houdini pyro sim into a video game, sometimes that's done just with cards, just with flat renders of it. And we have labs tools that help with that. You can export as certain volumetric representation. Actually, I think VDBs are starting to be used in Unreal, if I'm not mistaken, but it's always about optimization with games. So you have to kind of think in that world too, and kind of make sense of how to optimize for it. So a lot of times the sims are done the same from the start, but then they diverge when you get to the part of obviously rendering and getting it ready for its final look, right? So Layla, hopefully that's a little bit of a long rambling answer, but hopefully that gives you kind of the mindset of those two different worlds and kind of how they have to exist maybe similarly, but they they can't really all, you can't have your cake and eat it too, so it's kind of tricky. There's these kind of two diverging paths towards optimization or towards full use of all resources that you have at your disposal. So yeah, you're welcome. No problem. That's just kind of an observation I made. I think I was actually even just talking to my wife when I got back from GDC, and I was kind of like, this feels so different than SIGGRAPH. SIGGRAPH is always like, we pushed all of these servers until they were basically melting to get this result. And then the other thing is like, how do we run this on a, a 2-core or a 4-core mobile phone? And it's just such a different dichotomy. It's like, this is so weird. Like, we're not running these on supercomputers, we're running them on phones in our pockets, so it's just different. It's really interesting. Oh, and speaking of that, I don't know if anybody saw this. This is just total random off the top of my head, but there's you can actually get Axiom, the Pyro solver, the GPU solver for iPad now. So that's crazy. It's like I think it's a really stripped down basic version, but like you can kind of just like quickly make like looks and things like that for Pyro sims. And then I think you can like, I don't know how it works exactly. My wife actually has a iPad. I should play with it on there, but I'm guessing you can pull it over or something like that. I don't know exactly how it works, but you could bring it into Houdini and like continue exploring from there. Hey Jamal, welcome. Welcome to oh cool, the files can apparently be exported to continue. Yeah, that's what I would assume. Like you could export some sort of something, from Axiom on your iPad over to your computer to keep working on it. So certainly really interesting. I mean, I never would have thought of that. And I think Matt Puchala is the one who worked on that. And actually, if you saw sometime last year, I want to say there was an Apple event where they were showing developers working on, or like showing different artists working on stuff. And he was showing Axiom on a desktop, but it was running on it was like a standalone app it was Axiom and a standalone app for like an M2 Mac or whatever. And people were like, wait a second, does that mean it could run on an iPad? And everybody's like, huh? Like it was just this like light bulb. And I'm sure he was already thinking about that, but everybody else was like, wait a second. And here it is. It's on the iPad. So yeah, it's so wild. What a crazy thing. But then again, iPads are basically laptops in disguise. They're pretty powerful these days. So, especially with those crazy Apple chips that they've come out with, but, cool. All right. So, if anybody else has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm just going to mention again, just a couple of things like, the housekeeping stuff. Like, if you guys want to join the Discord server, HoudiniHangout.com. Yes, I was talking about the Axiom on iPad. Yes, yeah, it's so crazy. If you'd like to join the Discord server, there's a link, an invite on HoudiniHangout.com. So you can go there and check that out. Also, I had a little announcement that I actually started a Patreon. So there's a Patreon link here. Basically access to HIP files from all my past streams, and I'm going to continue putting them in there, obviously, going forward. So, yeah, you can sign up. You could just support me with some coffee, or you could get access to the HIP files. So, that's kind of a couple different levels in there. I'm not going to be doing anything too crazy with it, but it was an idea I had, and I was, kind of put it out there and was like, yeah, people seem pretty interested. So there we go. Louise back because they have a question. I'll be back to bed after your answer, I swear. When did you realize that you were able to get Houdini jobs? For me, I think I felt I distinctly remember a time for me where I kind of started, I had a job when I was learning Houdini, which is a very privileged position. I actually work in I'm from a really pretty small city. And so I was able to find a job, and then they actually let me kind of go out and learn Houdini to add skill set because we wanted to have more simulation in our stuff. Hey, Daryl, how's it going, man? It's my buddy, Nick. But so so when I was working when I was working in industry and kind of going through these different tutorials and courses and things like that online, there was a point at one, it was a bit into it for me. I wasn't able to give 24 hours a day to it. Obviously I had projects and things like that at work that I had to do, but there was a point maybe a year into it where I started realizing that I'd maybe watch a tutorial or a course or something like that, and I was like, oh, I know what they're about to tell me how to do. And like, okay, I think this is, I understand this. I think there'll be a moment for you at some point where you'll start to go, oh, like you're following along with something, or somebody's teaching you something, or you're doing a course or whatever you might be doing. Maybe you're in school, whatever. And you start to think, wait a second, I think I know where we're going with this process, or I think I know what the end goal is here. And so I'm just going to switch back to full screen since we're just talking. So, I know where this is going. And I think you'll start to have those moments of kind of clarity and where things will start to click and sink in. And I think those are the moments where you start to realize, wait, I actually kind of know this. I actually would come home and I would get excited when like I knew some Vex code that they were going to type, and I could they were like, we're going to use this. Okay. Yep. I know exactly what the syntax is of that, and I can type it in, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So like there's moments where those things start to really click, and that's when you start to go, okay, I think I got this figured out. And honestly, if you see the thing I always tell students, when I'm talking to them is, if you see a job description out there that says you need 3 to 5 years of blah, 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 but you need to know Houdini and you need to have, done this and that and blah, blah, blah. If you have a reel that, if you feel like you have a reel that has good examples that are solid, that you're proud to put out there, apply for the job, because you never know what's going to happen. Like, I applied for this job at Side Effects on a complete whim, did not expect it at all. And every step of the way, I just kind of went, oh yeah, you'll never stop learning, Louis, for sure. You're going to always learn. That's just in general. That should be if you're coming into the VFX industry, always going to be learning. You'll get there, Gers. It'll keep going. You'll have it click. But always put yourself out there, because like every step of the way, I kind of went, well, that's nice. This is kind of a, pie in the sky, never going to happen job, but you always have a chance. You know what I mean? You never know what someone sees in you. So put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to apply for jobs, even if it feels like, I feel like I'm kind of underqualified for this, but I think I got a good reel, and throw it out there. See what happens. The worst thing that happens is say, no, this job isn't for you. And you keep going. That's a big part of, I think, of this industry, is learning how to deal with those either rejections or, whatever it might be, but yeah, Sig, I totally agree. You learn something every day. It's always something new. Like I said, I was literally just watching this stuff about, there you go. We're all learning. That's the whole thing, is like, there's like every Discord server you're in, any chat that you're in, any video you're watching, like I cannot, like, it's so often that even the simplest thing, you're like, I did not know that. And I didn't know that. Like, it's just so crazy. You always are learning something new. Like just today, I was like watching a couple videos on crowds, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like, how did I not know this? Okay. Yep. Here we go. So yeah, it's always a learning process. And, I think you'll continue. Yeah. Everyone in this industry is still a student, for sure. Jamal, you're asking me about Houdini 20. Let me tell you everything about Houdini 20. No, just kidding. The thing that I can say is, if you go to the SIGGRAPH page on the website and you go down here, you can actually get a little preview of what's going to be coming in Karma XPU. So I would take a look at that. And, if you're interested in what's coming in Houdini 20, there you go. That's a little sneak peek that I can legally tell you about. without losing my job. Um, but there it is. Um, yeah, Louis, you're saying, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You applied for jobs that you weren't ready for, and then you learned a lot on the way. Exactly. Um, breaking down, recreating work you're inspired by. Yeah, that's a big thing too. Yeah. I mean, if you see something out there that somebody's done, give it a shot, you try to learn how it's done, like you're always like some of these other guys are saying, you're always going to be learning. You're always going to be growing. You have to have that mentality of a learner, or else you're just going to stagnate and kind of be left by the wayside. I think this, yes, that's true. Feathers in 20 were shown at FMX, another really cool tool set. So there's a couple little sneak peeks out there. But I mean, that's just the sneak peeks, so it's pretty cool. But oh no, you're not bothering me with the question. I just can't. I mean, I can't say anything. So you'll find out in due time. No worries. But yeah. Yeah, being able to, see something that you're inspired by and kind of figure out how it's done, reverse engineering stuff, you learn a ton through that. I mean, honestly, I've done that a lot of times. I've made a little folder over the years of different, I mean, does anybody know what a blog is or any, websites like, basically like tagging different things that I find that are inspiration, and I use some of those things to to give myself little visual inspiration to like go back and try at some point when I'm kind of not sure what I want, if I want to play around with something, go in and maybe try to recreate this or that and do these different ideas. So that's always a great thing, grab some art pieces for visual inspiration and try to recreate it in Houdini and then make it move or do something cool with it. So there's so many different ways to learn. If you're interested in enjoy, working in this software and whatever, I mean, I think, yes, you got, yeah. So, I probably couldn't normally tech support based on just an error message. But what's happening there is I think your graphics card has hit its memory limit, and it's basically turning off your GPU in the XPU renderer. So your scene must be pretty big and it's running out of memory. Could be image resolutions. You could have a lot of huge image textures, could be a lot of geometry. So yeah, that would be, oh no, actually that's a CPU ID. Actually, I don't know. Maybe that's not your GPU because it does say CPU ID 1 is registered critical error. Yeah, that's definitely a crash of some sort. I would normally say that's a GPU, but it actually does have, oh, there you go. I added a lot of particles. Yeah, that'll have, yeah. That crash just means you added too many particles. It's definitely an memory issue, and I think you might have just saturated the memory and RIP your Houdini session. Yeah, that's the one bad thing with oh, that's good. That's good. It just stopped the render. Well, that's good. Yeah, that's the one thing with Houdini is that it'll do what you ask it to, but if what you ask it to do is going to fill up all your memory, it'll fill up all your memory. I've run into that quite a few times. Be careful with sliders on voxel scales. That's the killer, man. Whew. You move that voxel scale too far down and it's like, oh, you wanted me to create 3 trillion voxels? All right. When your computer is a molten piece of mush, I'll be back. So yeah, it'll do whatever you ask it to. Cool. Well, very good. You know what? Actually, it's getting a bit late for me. I'm sure it's late for some other people's. Always type voxels. No sliders. Yep. Don't use those sliders if you're working with voxels. Although you can hit a typo in a voxels and that can mess you up just as bad, but the likelihood's much lower. um, yeah. And if you hit 0, sometime I don't know if it still does that, but sometimes that'll just destroy it, or it'll get to so close to 0 that it's like infinity sized, and you just spam escape and go cry. Cool. Well, yeah, it's getting a little late here, and I think obviously we've had a ton of great questions. It's been super fun. I really appreciated this. But yeah, I really appreciate everybody's questions and everybody's. Oh, it's not that late. It's 10:30, but it's just been a long day. I've done a few meetings and presentations today, so I've done a lot of talking. So I'm like, I think I'm done with the talking for the day. 9 holes. Sorry if I missed if you had examples. Mostly all object based. I've seen a few big studio examples of hair added in Solaris layouts. Yeah, no, those are good questions. I think the best thing for hair in Solaris is using the hair procedural. Now studios aren't going to have that yet because most of them aren't. Yeah, no problem. But studios aren't on 19.5 yet, so they don't have the hair procedural. So you probably they haven't done any of that yet. And they'll probably want to make their own procedurals. So procedurals is a big thing to be able to reduce the cache size of USD. And I do USD sim for any data versus file cache. I haven't really gotten to that personally yet, but that's because I don't work in a studio. I know that studios and pipelines are definitely caching out USD data just for sake of not having to convert it, because obviously that's a huge, it's just doubling your data for no reason. So anyways, but yeah, those are great questions. Cool. Well, everybody, thank you so much. No problem, David. Yeah, glad you showed up on time as well. Yeah, thanks everybody for being part of the stream. Super fun. And yeah, if you're interested in getting HIP files and things like that, there's a Patreon and Discord and all that kind of stuff. So I'll be around, and if you need me, I'll be on the Discord server and other Discord servers out there probably. But thanks so much everybody for being a part of the stream tonight, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye everybody. Yeah, no problem. Thanks everybody. Bye.